The chains of Dagones. The red sands of Dagones Prime shimmered beneath twin suns. The arena, known across the system as the Crimson Pit, was packed with spectators from every corner of the empire. Nobles in flowing robes, mercenaries with scarred faces, and even the High Chancellor's delegates seated in a golden box above the rest. In the center stood a man, broad-shouldered, muscles taut with years of labor, his skin darkened by exposure to the planet's merciless climate. His name was Kale, once a prince of the Elorian frontier, now a branded slave of the Varelian Empire. Around his neck hung the iron collar that marked him, a faint glow pulsed from it, its hidden mechanism ready to electrocute him if he stepped out of line. He bore no weapons, only his bare fists and eyes full of fire. Opposite him walked a woman clad in ornate battle armor, a glistening mix of silver and crimson. Her long, golden hair whipped with each stride, and the cheers of the crowd rose to a frenzy at her arrival. "Lady Orisa," they roared, "champion of the arena, daughter of Governor Therion, untouched in battle." She stepped up to Kale and sneered, looking him up and down with cold disdain. "You don't belong here, filth!" She spat the words with venom. Kale didn't answer. His jaw tightened. "Speak, slave," she hissed. Still silence. Orisa took another step forward and, in a show of utter contempt, spat in his face. The crowd gasped, half in delight, half in shock. Kale didn't flinch. A horn blew, signaling the start of the battle. Orisa whirled back, drawing her twin plasma blades with a flourish, twirling them through the air as if performing a dance. Kale wiped the spit from his face, planted his feet into the sand, and waited. She came at him like a tempest. The blades hissed through the air, aimed for his throat. He ducked, twisted, and rolled, narrowly avoiding death. But he didn't strike back. Not yet. Afraid to fight back, Orisa taunted, her voice rising over the clash. "Maybe you finally realized what you are." The crowd jeered and laughed, enjoying the one-sided game. But Kale's silence was not fear. It was calculation, patience. Every dodge was a lesson. Every strike she made, a chapter in her story he was reading with perfect clarity. He saw her overconfidence, her tendency to overreach, the half-second hesitation in her left wrist when she shifted her weight. A weakness. He had fought for survival since he was taken from his homeland. First in the mines, then the pits, and now the arena. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a survivor forged in the fires of brutality. And he remembered everything. Finally, Orisa lunged with a scream, going for a killing blow. Kale stepped inside her swing, grabbed her wrist with impossible speed, and twisted. Her blade clattered to the sand. The crowd went silent. Kale stepped back, still not striking her, giving her the chance to pick it up. He didn't want an easy kill. He wanted her to understand. Orisa's face twisted in rage. "You dare humiliate me? I've dared far worse," Kale said, his first words of the match. She hesitated just for a heartbeat. That was all he needed. He launched forward, sweeping her legs and slamming her into the ground. Sand burst around them. Her breath flew out in a sharp gasp. Kale stood over her, fists clenched, not striking, just staring. She met his gaze, not with fear, but with confusion, as if seeing him for the first time. And the crowd? They didn't cheer. They watched. Something was shifting. The slave had not just defied the noble. He had humbled her. But Kale knew this was just the beginning. The fire beneath the sand. The aftermath of the duel echoed through the Crimson Pit for hours. The audience left in murmurs, whispers spreading like wildfire. The slave stood his ground. He spared her. In the private chambers beneath the arena, Kale sat alone, shackled to the cold stone bench. His wrists bled from the tight cuffs, but he didn't wince. He stared ahead, jaw clenched, reliving every second of the match. Then the door creaked. Orisa entered. No guards, no weapons, just her and a flask of water. Kale raised an eyebrow. She placed the flask beside him and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You should have killed me," she said, voice cold but quieter than before. Kale didn't answer. "You humiliated me, in front of nobles, my father's guests, the entire sector." Still, he said nothing. She stepped closer. "Why?" He turned toward her, finally speaking. Because I'm not like you. Ursa flinched, as if the words struck harder than any blade. Every fighter you faced before came to win. I came to survive. And survival teaches you when to strike and when to wait. I would have shown you no mercy, she snapped. I know. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the distant roar of another fight echoed through the stone walls. I've trained my whole life in the Imperial Academies. Served as a tactician. Killed men twice your size in war zones. But I've never felt powerless. Until today. Kale looked her dead in the eyes. That's how you made others feel. Every time you stood over a slave. Every time you laughed as they died. For the first time, shame flickered in her expression. It was brief, but it was real. I was taught that power is taken, not earned, she whispered. Kale's voice was a low growl. Then you were taught wrong. Ursa turned away, walking to the door. Before she left, she paused. They'll make you fight again tomorrow. The grand duel. Against Goran, the behemoth. Kale didn't respond. He's not like me, she said. He won't hesitate. He'll rip you apart. Let him try. She looked back at him, something uncertain in her gaze. If you survive, I want a rematch. Kale's lips curled into the faintest smirk. You'll have to earn it. She left. The next morning, the arena was full again. This time, the mood was different. Anticipation replaced arrogance. Whispers turned to wagers. They'd come to see the slave die. Kale stood at the center once more. But this time, he carried a crude glaive, barely sharpened, far from equal to his opponent's weapon. And across from him, Goran emerged. 7 feet tall, muscles like steel cables. A warhammer the size of Kale's chest slung over one shoulder. Goran had been bred for war, a vat-grown monster who'd killed champions on 5 worlds. The horn blew. Goran charged like a bull, roaring, hammer raised. Kale didn't move. Not at first. At the last second, he spun aside, letting the hammer strike sand, then countered with a sweep to Goran's knee. It barely staggered the beast. The battle raged like thunder. Sand sprayed, weapons clashed. The crowd roared. Goran struck again, grazing Kale's shoulder. Blood flew. Kale rolled, breathing hard, but eyes locked on his foe. You are not stronger, he reminded himself, but you're smarter. He lured Goran into a pattern, predictable, brutal swings. Each one slower, angrier. Kale leapt, slid under a wild swing, and struck behind Goran's leg. The giant fell to one knee. With a primal shout, Kale launched himself at the monster, driving the glaive into Goran's side. The beast roared, and then fell. Silence, then explosion of sound. The crowd stood, screaming, chanting, Kale, Kale, Kale. He stood there, bloodied but unbowed, staring up at the nobles. And among them, Ursa stood, not sneering, not mocking, but watching in awe. The slave had done the impossible. And now, whispers of the Empire would never forget Kale his name. Echoed through the cities of the Varelian Empire like thunder rolling down from the mountains. In the mining colonies, slaves carved his name into stone walls. In the backstreets of Dagoni's prime, children played games pretending to be the man who had defeated Goran, the behemoth. But in the heart of the Empire, his victory was a threat. Governor Therian sat in his war chamber, red-faced and seething. He humiliated my daughter, killed our champion, and now the people chant his name? General Korvash shifted uncomfortably. He's become a symbol, sir, for the slaves, for the commoners. They see him as hope. Therian slammed his fist into the table. Hope is dangerous. Kill him, quietly, before he becomes a legend. Below the governor's palace, in the Gladiator barracks, Kale stood under the moonlight, staring through iron bars at the city beyond. His wounds still ached. His shoulder burned. But his mind was sharp. He wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was a symbol. The door creaked. He turned to see Ursa entering again. No armor, no weapons, just a cloak draped over her shoulders and a different look in her eyes. Your death has been ordered, she said simply. Kale didn't react. I expected as much. They'll poison your food. Tonight. He raised an eyebrow. And you're telling me this because... She hesitated. Because I was wrong about you. Kale didn't speak, letting her continue. I thought you were beneath me. Thought you were just another brute. But the way you fight, the way you think, you're more than any noble I've ever known. A bitter smile touched his lips. You sound like someone who's thinking of switching sides. She looked him dead in the eye. Maybe I already have. Kale studied her for a long moment, then asked, what do you want? To help you escape. To help you fight back. If we take out the collar, and if you make it out of the capital, there are rebel cells. People who'd follow someone like you. Kale stepped forward, lowering his voice. And why would the daughter of a governor risk everything for a slave? Uris's jaw tightened. Because the Empire made me into something I hate. And you reminded me who I used to be. He nodded once. Then let's begin. That night, with the help of a forged guard uniform and Uris's codes, Kale slipped through the underground tunnels beneath the barracks. When a patrol nearly caught them, Urisa drew her blade and took down her own men without hesitation. As they reached the outer gate, alarms suddenly blared. Their escape had been discovered. Urisa turned. Go. I'll hold them. Kale grabbed her wrist. No. We do this together. Outside, rebels disguised as traitors waited with hoverbikes. As the gates burst open behind them, Kale and Urisa mounted and vanished into the desert night, pursued by Imperial skiffs. Blaster fire lit the sky. Sand exploded in columns. But Kale held steady, weaving through dunes, leading them through the old canyon routes only slaves ever knew. Eventually, the pursuit thinned, then vanished. They were free. For now. Deep in the outer territories, Kale stood before a group of rebels. Miners, farmers, deserters. Their eyes wide with disbelief. You're him, one whispered. The one who beat Gorin. Kale raised his hands. I'm not a savior. I'm not a king. I'm just a man who's tired of chains. He looked to Urisa, then back to the crowd. But I will fight. For every one of you. And I promise you this. If we stand together, they will fear us. A murmur rose, then a roar. That night, under the stars of a broken empire, something was born. Not a rebellion. A reckoning. The fall of the arena. 1 year later, the Varelian banners burned across the outer colonies. What began as scattered riots had become an organized uprising. Kale's name was no longer whispered. It was shouted from the rooftops, painted on war banners, and carved into the armor of rebels who now called themselves the Unchained. But the war wasn't won. Not yet. Kale stood on a cliff overlooking the Crimson Pit, the arena where it all began. Below, Imperial banners still flew. It had become a fortress now, the governor's last stronghold on Dagoni's prime. Inside, Therion waited with his elite forces and prisoners, including Kale's former brothers in chains. Tonight, it would end. Beside him stood Urisa, clad in matte black armor, stripped of all noble sigils. She had become a commander of the Unchained, trusted and respected. Are you ready? She asked. Kale nodded. Let's tear it down. Under cover of night, rebel units descended from the cliffs and stormed the outer gates. Explosions rocked the ground as charges blew through steel walls. Rebels poured in, weapons blazing. Kale led the charge through the western corridor, his old path from the barracks to the arena floor. He fought like a ghost, silent, precise, deadly. The halls ran red with the blood of guards. When they reached the central arena, Kale paused. It looked the same. The red sand, the stone walls. The ghost of Gorin's roar still echoed in his memory. He saw the prisoners, slaves, many of whom had cheered for him that day a year ago. They watched now with tears in their eyes. You're free, Kale told them, unlocking their chains. You always were. Then came the final challenge. Governor Therion descended from the Emperor's platform, flanked by 2 towering mech armor guards. So, this is your grand revolution? He sneered. Led by a slave and a traitor? Kale stepped forward. Led by a man who remembers what it's like to be crushed and still stand back up. Therion drew his energy blade. You should have died in the sand. And you should have listened when your daughter told you the world was changing. With a war cry, Kale charged. The final duel began. Blades clashed. Sparks flew. Therion was skilled. Years of military command had not dulled his reflexes. But Kale had something stronger. Purpose. Every strike was fueled by memory, of chains, of spit, of silence. Ursa joined the fight, disarming one of the mech guards with a spinning kick and blasting the other with a stolen rifle. Together, they overwhelmed Therion, forcing him back to the edge of the arena. Kale disarmed him with a final blow, then placed the tip of his blade at the man's throat. "No more slaves," Kale said. Therion growled, "You'll never survive. The Empire." Kale drove the blade through his chest, then let it come. With Therion dead and the Crimson Pit seized, the rebels lit a fire in the center of the arena, burning the slave records, the noble banners, and the collars that once held thousands in bondage. Kale stood in the center, surrounded by those he had once bled beside. Ursa approached, dust and blood on her face, but her eyes bright. "You did it. We did it," Kale corrected. Cheers erupted. The arena that once echoed with the roars of oppression now sang a new song. Freedom. And Kale? He didn't smile. He simply looked at the stars above and whispered, "Let the galaxy know. The slave broke his chains."